So, hello, everyone. This, as it has been repeated, this is After the Audit, Integrating Accessibility into the Testing Process. I am Crystal Preston-Watson. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a quality and accessibility engineer at Salesforce.com. I am a Black woman. I am wearing a eye patch with a rhinestone X over my right eye. I'm also wearing a headband with roses. And also on the slide, there is a illustration of me. There's no eye patch, there is just glasses, but that illustration is also wearing a rose headband, so sort of matching. Outside of my work at Salesforce, I spend time talking to my cats, some Miss Etta James. You have to say the whole thing once, all out. You can't just say Etta James. It's Miss Etta James in Shadowmere. So any of you who play Elder Scrolls will get the reference. I also talk to my husband sometimes. I perform improv and gaming, and Hitman is my game of choice right now. And if you have any more questions after the Q&A today, you can find me to ask those on Twitter. My handle is Scopic Engineer. By email, contact at crystalprestonwatson.com, or just on my website has every way possible to contact me at crystalprestonwatson.com. Okay, so here is the agenda for my talk today. There are 4 parts. For part 1, in the end of the audit, this is a small section on what accessibility audits are and entail for those who might be new to the process. Part 2 is learning about upskilling your team. Part 3 is techniques in action, kind of things and steps your team can do during testing to kind of support your efforts that took place during audits. And part 4, it's thoughts on automation, which is always fun to talk about as a tester. So let's get started. Part 1, end of the audit. And there's a quote on the slide, which is, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." And that is from Semisonic, Closing Time. Fun fact, that song is actually about a baby being born and not a bar closing. So who knew? You're learning something besides accessibility and testing today. So though this first part is called End of the Audit, I wanted to go a little bit further into details that, what happens, further into detail on what happens during an accessibility audit for those who might be new to the process and tuning in. There's a lot of information to take in at the beginning, so it's important that we kind of have a common understanding, common baseline of what the things this is all about. So what is an accessibility audit? Basically, it's a way to appraise a site or application level accessibility against standards and guidelines to identify areas to improve accessibility. Most audits will and probably should be a mix of manual testing and also with some assistance from automation tools. An audit can be conducted via internal team to a company or organization, or an external consultant like DQ, but that can be dependent on if you're dealing with things like your budget that you have, the availability of team members, and just other factors. So the phases of an accessibility audit aren't going to look the same for every business and organization. I've undergone a few audits, both as part of an internal team and an organization that has brought in external consultants. So this is my perspective on what a typical audit will entail, the typical phases of an audit. It might look different for other teams. It might look different for your team, but this is a rough estimate of what a typical audit would be. So one is review of features to be audited. This is important as you're not going to be able to test every single section and feature of your application. So usually in the audit, it's going to focus on a representation of your site or a specific feature. You're not going to test every single thing. It's just not possible. Two is testing, and that's going to consist of manual testing and automated tools and extensions. And after your testing is done, the testing can vary. It's usually makes up a good portion of what an audit, like how long an audit runs. But after your testing, you're going to get a result, a report of your results. Sometimes those results will come at the very end of an audit, or they'll come, on a regular cadence throughout testing. As a personal kind of preference, I like a regular cadence instead of getting one giant, just plop of issues, just so to get started on remediation, which is the next phase. These next issues that I'm going to talk about, 4 through 6, I have a star next to these 3 points, and because these are really dependent on the organization and the motivation kind of the audit. And with remediated issues, this is where your teams are going to start to triage, organize, and work on issues found during the audit. And sometimes what ends up happening is that everything ends up in backlog. I'm just being real. It's like you get the results, and then they all go kind of get put there. So if your items don't end up all at backlog at step 4, you're going to have retesting, evaluation, and validation. Again, this depends on your, kind of your team and your organization and the motivation of why the audit was conducted. But this time, the work will be retested that went through a fix and either found to need more work, or the fixes are validated. And number 6 is accessibility, like performance report, ACR, or sometimes it's called a VPAT, a voluntary product accessibility template. This is a typical. This is going to be typical of a audit that was conducted by external vendor. Not all audits, will generate a VPAT or ACR. Some companies just want the issues. So again, as I said, this is a quick part. This sums up that all was to sum up what an accessibility audit is and what you might typically expect to have happen during one. And I'm going to call back the semisonic lyric. The beginning or the audit in is a new beginning to integration into your existing process. And on the screen here is a curved path of stones in a probably a pond or I guess swamp, covered with like reads, because really an accessibility audit is a stepping stone. So that brings us into part 2, upskilling your team. And on the slide, it's a quote: introduce you to some new things and upgrade you. And that is from Upgrade You by Beyonce. Fun fact, I don't have one because it's Beyonce and you probably already know everything. So yeah. So an audit is a stepping stone, and depending on what you do, it's a stone that also has momentum. So bear with me because I am not a physicist, but I am going to get into some physics right now. So momentum is mass in motion. Momentum equals mass time velocity. So breaking this down a little bit further, if you have an object and that object isn't moving or is at rest, then it has zero momentum. And let's do an example. If I have in, say, one hand, in one hand I have a stone, and the other hand I have a feather. If I throw this feather up in the air and leave the stone just in my hand, that feather has more momentum, though the stone clearly has more mass. So if you have an audit and you let it rest, you have no momentum. The issues might end up getting fixed, but what about new features? What do we do to keep that at the keep on top of the level of accessibility of our applications and our site? So we use momentum of the present audit, the audit that just happened, as a way to integrate accessibility and keep it a priority in our regular testing process. And I'm going to go over a few things that you can do and a few actions that you can way to give velocity to your audit within your testing team. So first off, you want to establish a baseline. On the screen next to establish a baseline text is a very cute image of a cactus with like bubble googly eyes that's reading a book, but it's probably not reading a book because cactuses can't read. So, but establish a baseline of knowledge. It's important that everyone has a shared language when it comes to understanding and talking about what accessibility is, so everyone can communicate and on why and how to go through testing it. You want to encourage teams to learn through courses, attend conferences like this one, and offering team training on core fundamentals. Secondly, you want to play to people's strengths. And the image next to this particular point is a cute little cat that is staring off in the distance, but the shadow it's casting is of a lion, because this is how my cats think of themselves. They think there are lions, and they, I'm not to take that dream from them. But you want to empower the members of your team, to make a difference. And that is about finding people for the tasks that fit within their experience and their skill. If someone's apprehensive about testing using a screen reader, then while they're learning about that skill, you can have that person be a champion of keyboard testing and and teaching that to others. So when people feel and know they're a part of a solution, the more they are involved in the process and in making integration a success. continuing on, open and positive environment. And to the side of this picture is a image of a kind of lakeside, like evergreen trees, large sky, reflection of the trees in the lake, and also mountains in the background. If you're doing a good job with nurturing a positive environment, you're going to end up with an open one as well. Encourage people to ask questions that may make them feel vulnerable. Something I really notice when I've done, when I've led accessibility testing initiatives is that people get really ashamed to tell me that they're, the struggles they have with learning a screen reader. And, and I understand that because I'm someone that does use a screen reader. And so they're like, oh no, I can't tell you. And she's going to think I'm a bad person. And, one thing I really want to make them understand is that accessibility testing is not something that you can learn overnight. You don't, just like with anything else, you don't learn other testing techniques and methodologies overnight. So it's okay to struggle with this as you're learning. I mean, I still struggle with my screen reader. I use TalkBack, and there was just new features that were added, and I'm having to go through that and kind of relearn some things and teach myself some new, about these new features. So, I'm not an expert, and you can't expect anyone to be an expert super fast. And it's really, it's a good thing to encourage people on your teams that, hey, it's good to take your time. We'll get there. And the last point on the slide is upskill the whole organization. Now, this is like one of my favorite images, and I'm describing these images because I know they're kind of decorative, but they're cool, and I want to know about them. So it is a kangaroo with boxing gloves, who's looking like super yeah, I did this kind of attitude, with a human boxer laying on the mat kind of in defeat. So it's not unusual for testing and QA to become the champions of accessibility for businesses, organizations. But for accessibility to be the true priority and be done with quality, it has to be something that the whole organization is taking up and is concerned with. So though I'm talking just, kind of in the context of testing departments and teams, this is something that really the whole organization needs to take on if it really truly is going to be a success. You can't, otherwise it becomes this nice to have the last thing we think of, and it just, it becomes not done well, and it puts a burden on the testing team to be the only kind of the only people who are in charge with ensuring accessibility. And that doesn't make quality accessibility initiative in any way. So let's go on to part 3, techniques in action. So there's a quote on this slide, and it says, "You don't have to speak, just seek and peep the technique." And this is from Eric B. and Rakim, "Don't Sweat the Technique." Fun fact, this song was in the new Tom and Jerry movie. That's what I was told when I was looking up fun facts for the song. And yeah, all right, I have not seen that movie, so you can tell me where they use it if you know. I would like to know what it's the background for. Sorry. Okay, so every little step you make, each step keeps up the momentum to fundamental team and organizational change. And those steps are checklist, keyboard testing, and automated tools. These are some of the techniques that can be employed by your team in balance with your team's upskilling. Each of these steps are is really kind of steps to a big idea of integrating and making accessibility a priority. So on this slide, we have accessibility checklist, and the image to go with this is two people who are really excited about their checklist. One is holding a checklist that's all marked off, and the other is holding a computer. It's in all these images on the slide are illustrations. But when it comes to checklists, I know there are some thoughts because I know some people are probably right now and go, checklist, this really? Okay. I'm not a fan of checklist accessibility at all. And this is not what I'm suggesting. But I read an article by Carl Groves, who is, fabulous. And it gave me a different perspective on how checklists can be used by a team that's new to accessibility testing. And one of the points that Carl drives is checklist quality is critical. And so the way you can use a checklist is that, making sure they're not static. They're not just something your team will be like, I did this, I did this, I did this other thing, but you're using it as a regular review as part of your upskilling of your team, that you're going through these checklists, you're making sure that they're adapting to that particular feature, that particular page of a website. Checklists, really what you would, really want to do is making sure that they're really checking what the accessibility of that particular feature or part of the application. So that means that you do need to make these kind of like, I guess I want to say breathing documents, but that's probably a good way to do it. And so, checklists are not inherently a bad thing if you are making sure that the quality is good and that you are constantly reviewing them. Next is keyboard testing, and this image is just an illustration of someone typing on clearly what is a MacBook Pro, but they probably don't want this image site I got this from probably don't want you to say that, but it's a MacBook Pro. So, so keyboard testing. Keyboard testing has the benefits of being low, pretty much free cost, easily to implement, and a low barrier to entry. Most people know how to use a keyboard. I'm not going to assume, because as my grandma used to say, you assume, you make a out of me and you. So, but its biggest benefit is that it's one of the most important tests you can do for accessibility. When I'm asked about what's a good way to learn about testing with assistive tech? The first thing I tell people to do is get comfortable navigating with a keyboard alone without a mouse. Many of the issues that you would find with a screen reader are going to be found with just doing keyboard navigation. It's really effective testing, and it's something that can be done while your members get comfortable with using assistive technology like screen readers. And finally, on this slide is automation tools. And these, automation tools are things like Lighthouse, color checkers, things, DQ has like accents, extensions. And, these are things that can discover many critical issues. And this is a way for especially very new members to kind of, they can run these tools and kind of see, get used to like seeing what what these guidelines are and how how they show up on a site. So again, these are not these are some of the things that you can have your teams use, and they can be used in conjunction with as your team is learning about accessibility and getting and starting to integrate that into their regular process of testing. All right, so part 4, thoughts on automation. And this slide has a quote, and it says, "These points of data make a beautiful line, and we're out of beta, and we're releasing on time." And this is from Jonathan Coulton, Still Alive, which is one of the theme songs, or yeah, I guess this is a theme song from Portal. And I'm totally forgetting if it's from Portal 1 or 2. I didn't finish either one of those, which is not the fun fact. But the fun fact is that the cake is not a lie. And I'm not going to say more than that, because if you haven't finished the game like me and you haven't had it spoiled, even though it's been a while, you may want to learn that on your own. So this on this slide, they're 20. It says 20 to 40% of accessibility issues are found with automation testing. And one of the significant issues that face many testing teams with accessibility is the pressure to automate fast and everything. I mean, it's something that plagues non-accessibility issues teams, who have to deal with non-accessibility issues. But as you might have heard in other talks in this conference, and as this, says, accessibility automation can't find everything. And I know some people say up to 50%. I say it's 20 to 40. It can be 50% in the right hands, but I tend to think it's around usually between 20 and 40%, especially when you have a team that's new to doing accessibility in general. I'm not going to fight about percents. I think just to, really to drive home is that automation can't find everything. It's everything. It's definitely something that is needed. It is an important part of your strategy, but it's not the end all be all. And I'm going to describe this slide because on this slide is a robot. That is a giant robot that's holding up a woman who's looking out of a spyglass. And I just want to describe this because it reminds me of the movie The Iron Giant, and the giant was played by Vin Diesel. That's a fun fact, even though this wasn't a song lyric. Now you know. So I want to talk about a little bit more. Let's go a little bit more into automation. On this slide right here, there is an image of the test automation pyramid. And so it is the base of the pyramid is unit testing. The section is unit testing. There's 3 sections to this pyramid. The base is unit testing. The middle is integration, and the top is UI. And the test automation pyramid is a way to approach test automation for your application. It's focused around the time and repeatability of test and what you want to automate. So pretty much what it says that you want the bulk of your automation to be unit test. And then the next largest group of tests would be your integration, integration test, services, APIs. And then at the top there should be a very limited amount of use of UI test. So what I've come up with is a different sort of accessibility test automation pyramid. And here it is. So this is unlike, so let me describe this. So um, um this pyramid is inverse from, from I really realized I did this really wrong. um, but this is cool. So the pyramid is upside down, and the biggest part of this pyramid is unit tests. Then there's integration, which is the second, biggest part, and then there's UI, which is still the smallest part. Where the test automation period was focused around time and repeatability, the accessibility test automation pyramid is inverted because it focuses on human experiences. One, to give testers more time to focus on important manual testing for issues that can't be found with automation. Also, to keep that the people who are using these sites and applications are not robots. That is something that needs to be kept in mind. It's something I keep in mind every day that I work. What I do, the things that I find and I don't find have a major impact on the access that others need and want. So that's why the I have this. You really can't just rely on automation alone. And also, I should also note on this slide, you're not going to have really many integration tests when it comes to accessibility. Mainly, if you're going to do automation, you really want to focus on unit tests. There might be some UI tests that will come about, and usually when you have some of those, you can do that, but for the most part, a lot of those UI tests either can be found, that they're issues that could have been found in unit testing, or they're issues that really need to be found during manual testing. So really, when I have this automation test pyramid inverted, really should just say unit tests for the most part and a tiny bit of UI. Okay. This is a regression slide. So this is pretty much, it says regression, the slide. There, it spells out regression in balloons, and at the very end, so the very end of the I and the O and the N are separated in a gap, because I think it's making an inference that there is a regression in these balloons. I don't know. I just selected this because it said regression. So accessibility automation really shines when it comes to keeping regression out of your application. So one of the things that can be tricky is making sure that you're using issues fixed in an audit. You need to make sure that your issues that you find during your audit are making it into your regression testing. It doesn't really do any good if you're going through the trouble of an audit, finding bugs, and then you never monitor or evaluate the status of your application after the audit. But I'm going to be completely honest, it is not unusual for audits, multiple audits to be done, and they keep finding the exact same bugs every audit, because there was no monitoring of issues that were fixed previously and they went through regression. So if you neglect doing regression testing with your accessibility issues, then you're probably going to have some regression. So we're kind of coming towards the end here. And one of the things this slide is really just talking about a article that I really like to point people towards. And the title of the article is Building the Most Inaccessible Site Possible with a Perfect Lighthouse Score, by Manuel. And I'm not going to pronounce the last name because I really feel, but I really like, pointing people to this article as it drives home. When there's the focus on testing to be just automation. There's a lot of issues that can come about. I would say, if you haven't read this article, please Google it, building the most inaccessible site possible with a perfect lighthouse score, and do so. Okay, so we're at, second to last slide, takeaways. And, I didn't write any sort of prompts or beats for this slide, so I'm just going to totally improv it. Pretty much the takeaways is that, don't let your audits, like if you're going to get an audit, don't let it just sit there. You really do want to make sure that you're utilizing an audits, the audits that your organization, your businesses have to drive the momentum in not only in your testing, but in your organization as a whole. But if you don't have or don't yet have the possibilities of really upskilling and really shifting accessibility in the whole organization, you can at least do it for your testing team. And I really just want to make sure that people understand, again, accessibility really is vital. It's important. We need to understand it's not just about buttons and things like that. It's about that, but it's also about giving people access to applications, websites that really, really do affect, can affect the course of their lives. And so I just really want to drive home that accessibility needs to be a priority. It needs to be quality. And, let's not just look for accessibility and then languish it. Let's use that momentum and really let it drive making a holistic approach to making quality, accessible, and inclusive applications and software. And this was my talk. Just another slide. My last slide, again, it's the same as a previous slide I did. My name, Crystal Preston-Watson, quality engineer, salesforce.org. You have another illustration of me. This time, this illustration has an eye patch. So it matches my look today and still a rose headband. You can find me on Twitter at Scopic Engineer, email at contact@crystalprestonwatson.com, and my website, crystalprestonwatson.com. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Crystal. That was amazing. So many questions coming in. Thank you, audience, for being so engaged here with all these great questions. If you're ready, Crystal, we can dive right in.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. How do you handle feeling like an imposter when you become known as an accessibility advocate within your organization? I struggle feeling confident in my knowledge.
I definitely get that because I felt like an imposter when I first started really taking up the cause of accessibility. And the thing is that you don't need to feel like that. You don't, like, again, you don't have to have, all the answers. You don't need to know, every single question someone poses to you about ARIA or how to, do this with a accordion and things like that. Just by advocating the importance of thinking about accessibility and finding out the ways to make things accessible means that what you are doing is valid. You don't need to have all these. I don't have all the answers. I Google a lot of stuff. When people ask me about JAWS, I don't use JAWS that much when it comes to my personal life. So when I am using JAWS, when I'm trying to on my PC, I still swear at it. So don't let that, stop you of while you're learning things. There's going to be always someone that knows more than you. And there's always going to be something, things that you need to know. Things change, things, things, fade away, new things come. So don't let that stop you from really championing and really pushing forward the importance and the priority of accessibility.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, next question here. What do you consider core accessibility fundamentals when establishing a baseline of knowledge for a cross-disciplinary team?
Yeah, so with that, it's really just understanding what is meant by web accessibility, the things of like what is different disabilities, because there's a lot of people don't understand what is disability. They think they have an understanding, but a lot of times they don't. So it's understanding the nature of disability. It's understanding kind of really like common like a lot of kind of baseline tips of like alt text, that's something that everyone needs to understand, and that's not just for designers or UX. That is, that's your developers. That is your, that is your social media, and marketing people, that, things like that. There's, understanding just about how people gain access to a site with you just understanding their assistive technology. And honestly, it doesn't really hurt for everyone to understand kind of the basic ways, how basic the role-based accessibility, kind of the basics of like, well, what does a tester do? What does a developer do? Not doing deep dives, but it is good to kind of understand like, well, what would a UX person need to be concerned about? What does a developer need to be concerned about? What does a shareholder, our exec need to be concerned about?
Right.
Yeah, so it's not going to be deep dives. It's going to be kind of that basic like web accessibility 101 that you would find.
Right. Well, and how would you recommend that people get some of that learnings? Just the basics. How did you get started?
That is going to be like how I got started is is that I have a visual disability, so it was kind of it was twofold of getting tossed a ticket to test with JAWS, which I had never done before, and learning more about that. It is DQ is has trainings, and other external like vendors have trainings like that. A lot of websites, blogs, conferences like this one, which is awesome, being free so people can really access that knowledge. I mean, there's a lot of great talks that I'm going to have to go back and watch. So yeah, there's a lot out there. And make sure to diversify where you get things from, all sources.
Yep, for sure. Okay, next question here from Olive. Do you have a different process when auditing designs that are still living in Figma, Sketch, XD, and have not been programmed yet?
Oh, so auditing. So with that, I don't so much as like I don't have a lot of experience. What I usually do is work with a UX designer and kind of talk through. I don't have like an official so I've never really worked on that kind of like, okay, we're doing kind of an official audit of these designs. It's usually a lot of knowledge sharing on my part of like, well, and helping for the designers, because that, I'm not a designer, but, I'm I started as a quality engineer. I've done some front end development, so that's my strong points. But I'm also someone who really knows. I have a background in journalism. Someone who knows how to find resources and information. So it's a lot of sharing what I do know, and a lot of how to find that information, and reviewing, just looking at kind of things and giving my suggestions. And that does, and depending on if it's Sketch, it's Figma and things like that. So I don't know Figma that well, but I have some experience with it.
Right. Got it. Thank you. Okay. I believe you said you weren't too big of a fan of checklists, but there is a question here that got upvoted quite a bit. How do you create a good checklist?
So with that, like what I'm going to say is that there's plenty of checklists out there that you can find. You can Google like accessibility checklists. That's a very beginning starting point. Mm-hmm. You really do need to take a context of your features and your application, because if your checklist has everything about captioning and audio accessibility, and your application has no audio and video component, what are you checking? What are you testing for? So it really needs to be something that so I'm not saying find a list and just start using that list. It really does take a review of like, okay, here's some resources of things that are in some checklists that we found. Let's put together a checklist that would benefit us, and that's going to be a document. Again, as I said, it's going to be growing. You're going to have to keep up with reviewing it, because then if not, then it becomes an checklist accessibility, and then it really is no use.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Is there a distinction or difference between an accessibility review and audit?
Yeah, I think when it comes to a review, it becomes this thing of, I think there's really not an immediacy of like, well, we're going to look for things, and we're going to look for things and then want to fix, and fix those issues. It's more of like, okay, it doesn't have, I don't think it has a strong of intentions. It may be just semantic, like kind of just semantics of like of the words. I think with the audit, a lot of teams do feel that pressure of like, okay, we're spending money, we got budget, we got some exec was like, hey, you better show what you what this is for. So, but I think, but a review can still have a good outcome. I think it really. I guess that was a long way to say it really just meets the intentions of the people who are conducting these things of what the outcome is and the differences. Because you can have an audit that just sits there and all this stuff goes into backlog to never see the light of day. You can have an accessibility review that really does bring about action and change.
Right. Awesome. I think we have time for maybe one more question here. Maybe two. Let's see. What level of compliance should the QA team be aiming for? Are some guideline violations acceptable, or should there be no violations at all? Interested to hear your take on how to prioritize issues found by QA.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it would be nice to be like, yeah, no issues. Everything is fixed. That's not going to happen. Really, you want to make sure anything that's blockers, anything that's going to block functionality for your users, really important functionality of like putting things, buying things, putting things in a cart. Those are the things you want to focus on. And then you want to, like, everything is important, but if it's blocking the basic function of someone doing basic actions on your site, you really do need to make that, that the priority. It's just like accessibility issues really are kind of like any sort of, you can approach it like any other issue when it comes to testing. If it's blocking your customers and your clients to access your site, no matter what it is, then you focus on that. That does, and usually that falls in line with, conformance of like WCAG and other guidelines usually, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes that means you're led, it's a just a instead of a double A kind of compliance, it's a single A compliance that really is taking precedence, because it is a major issue for for your customers.
Right. Got it. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, and I think we're at time. So thank you so much, Crystal, for all of that information. And thank you for all of the participants who joined and hopefully learned a
Thank
lot.
you.
We appreciate your time and hope everybody enjoys the rest of AxCon. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.